You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots. Today's guest, Lisa Nydahl, the chairman of the Flight Time Duty Time Committee. Here's your host, Ryan Argenta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots. My name's Ryan Argenta. I'm a Seattle 330 FO and a volunteer with the MEC Communications Committee. This is part 3 of a 3-part series on scheduling, rotation construction, and fatigue. Trajectory today, it's pretty simple. We've heard from scheduling, we've heard from rotation construction, we've heard from Fitness Review Board in the past 2 episodes. We've heard your feedback. Today is what can we as a pilot group do about it? We're in Section 6 negotiations. We've got picketing coming up on March 10th in Atlanta to informationally picket against rotations and fatigue. There's another one on March 25th at the LA airport. So today we've got Lisa Nydahl. She's the chairman of the Flight Time Duty Time Committee. Lisa, welcome to the show. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
I'm looking at your business card, Lisa, and you're the chairman of the Flight Time Duty Time Committee. You're the chairman of the Fatigue Risk Management Team. You're a member of the Fitness Review Board, a member of the Flight Time Duty Time National Committee, and you're an A350 captain in LA. Are you tired?
Very funny. Actually, no. I'm not exactly tired, but I have a lot of hats. I'm chairman of the Flight Time Duty Time Committee. The Flight Time Duty Time Committee's job is to deal with everything FAR 117 and fatigue. And as you mentioned, I also sit on the ALPA National Flight Time Duty Time Committee. The National Committee has various airlines within ALPA that are represented on that committee. We have annual conferences, and also occasionally we meet with the FAA regarding current issues. The Flight Time Duty Time Committee for Delta MEC is the umbrella committee that oversees the Fitness Review Board, of which I am a member, and also the Fatigue Risk Management Team, which I am the chair. So the Fatigue Risk Management Team does the heavy lifting as far as the Flight Time Duty Time Committee goes. It's a technical body which we advise the company on managing the risk basically of pilot fatigue and also any operations under a fatigue risk management system. The company also consults with us regarding any kind of data collections that they conduct. As far as the FRMT, our bulk work, we deal with pre-month rotation construction. We also discuss anything FAR 117 regarding legalities, FRMS applications, authorizations, and basically anything under the FAR 117 umbrella.
It seems that flight time, duty time, and your office is pretty widespread. A little bit of everything, right? You work with the company on the front end of a rotation. You work with the company on the front end of rotation construction and throughout the entire process. And then in conjunction with the Fitness Review Board, who we spoke with Jessica McMahon on the last 2 episodes, then you deal with the after effects of fatigue and fatigue mitigation for the future. Does that sound about right?
That's correct. I have to mention, I also have a really great team on the FRMT who are very intelligent. They make me look smart, and they also are FAR 117 experts. So we deal with the front end, pre-month rotation construction. We also deal with the FRB and work hand in hand with them. So if we have fitness for duty reports, which deal with rotation construction that was fatiguing, they will report that back to us, and then we'll bring it back to the company as like really we go full circle. But the bulk of our work is pre-month or pre-rotation construction. But we also do work hand in hand with the FRB to look at what actually happened with fitness for duty reports and then get back with the company on trying to create less fatiguing rotations.
Okay, so essentially a full service office for the pilot group working with the company. And as we know, we're in Section 6 negotiations. A lot of pilots want to know, how do we make the rotations better? How do we mitigate fatigue? And I'll follow up with, do you feel that we have contractual bite in terms of flight time duty?
At this time, no. We have an agreement with the company that we will consult with them regarding a few of the things that I already discussed, but we actually don't have any contractual teeth in regards to pre-month rotation construction fatigue mitigations. We do actually have an agreed upon list of fatigue mitigations that the company and the FRMT have been implementing certain fatigue mitigations which exceed any PWA or FAR limitations. They go far and above that, but we're continually striving to improve those fatigue mitigations and add new ones. Our goal and our attack and our approach is a scientific base. So, one pilot's fatiguing rotation might be a really great rotation for another pilot. So what we look at is we look at everything that's science based and what actually science says on what a fatiguing rotation is. To answer your question, yes, we need stronger contractual teeth in the PWA in the next contract in order to enact some of the fatigue mitigations that we'd like to implement.
Do you work with the negotiating committee or through the MEC to address those issues? The fact that we need to negotiate that into our next contract?
Well, in the past, we've just worked through the MEC, but for this Section 6 specifically, we have been working with the negotiating committee directly.
Perfect. That's what I like to hear. I want to bring up a memo that management sent out on February 16th. And in that memo, the company states, we're investing millions of dollars each month in rotation construction parameters above and beyond FAR and PWA rules, working in close partnership with ALPA along the way. From a different part of the memo, continuous improvement is our goal here, and we know there are opportunities for us to pursue. I've asked around the MEC, from the MEC chairman to scheduling to fitness review, no one really knows what the company is talking about. And I understand this is a question for management, but do you know what about spending millions of dollars each month to improve rotations? We're not exactly seeing those improvements.
Well, Ryan, we have a history of applying fatigue mitigations to the bid packages on a pre-month basis. And as far as all that credit goes, that is what they're talking about as far as cost goes in their investment. So we have a history of applying these pre-month fatigue mitigations. Everything is costed out. So the credit that these pre-month fatigue mitigations cost is costed to the management team. And so that's why he said they've invested so many millions per month. It's just a costing thing. They're costing that to our fatigue mitigations.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the company is saying we're spending to improve rotations, where perhaps the reality of that is the rotations have hit an all-time low in quality, in fatigue. And we talked about this in episode 4 and 5, part 1 and 2 of this series. We talked about the optimizer and how their computer algorithms that the company uses, that scheduling uses, we described it as pulling levers or turning dials. And to say that they've increased credit to make rotations a little less fatiguing. And we know that during COVID, they turned the dial on credit down to 0. No credit allowed. You're flying hard block hours for productivity, for efficiency, to make up for the staffing issue. And now they're realizing that they've got to turn the dial up just a little bit so they don't continually create those fatiguing rotations that'll end up costing them more money in the end. They're gaslighting us, if you will, by saying, we're spending this money on you to improve your rotation. And the reality is they're not. We're still not back to baseline. That's just their cost of doing business.
That's correct. The optimizer does look at credit, number one, and its number one job is to reduce pilot credit. So through our fatigue mitigations, when we apply those, it does increase the credit, which costs the company a little bit more money. You need more pilots to fly the operation, which costs the company more money. So saying that he's invested millions per month, well, we used to always invest millions per month. That's not very much money in the scheme of things as far as overall pilot cost, but it is false advertising.
Yeah, that makes sense. And in part 2 of this series, Jessica mentioned that the company is really sending out the narrative that they are improving rotations. Things are getting better. And so we're getting the feedback that the pilots are saying, well, I'm glad the rotations are improving for someone else. They're not really improving for me, but I'm glad it's out there. But the reality is when you have 13,000 pilots all saying that, there's not much improvement, considering that rotations have fallen off from that baseline so far that any improvement back towards the baseline is a gain for the company, but still a deficit for us. Is that an accurate description?
Yeah, that's an accurate description. That's the problem. Networks demanding a certain schedule. They're demanding a certain capacity, crew planning, crew staffing. They can't man the operation the way network wants it. So they're forced to try and make ends meet and use that optimizer to decrease credit in whatever way they can. And sometimes our fatigue mitigations are disregarded.
Okay, let's take a break here. When we come back, we've got Captain Ryan. He's a frequent submitter through the DART system. We've got him in the studio with some great questions. I think you'll want to stick around. Back in 30 seconds to find out why.
Engage Podcast wants to hear from you. Send us your questions through the MEC DART system at dart.alpa.org. You have questions, we want answers. You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots.
We're back with Captain Ryan and Lisa Nydahl, the chairman of the Flight Time Duty Time. Ryan, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Lisa, for having me on. I appreciate it.
You bet. Hey, so you have submitted some really great questions to us, and what better a way to have those questions answered than have you here with us and with Lisa. So Ryan, take it away. Give us your background and what are your questions?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Just a little background on myself. I was one of the new recent upgrades to captain we've been having over the last 6 months to a year or so. So I recently upgraded to 320 Captain in October. I completed my OEs and then I immediately started flying the line. I was sitting a lot of reserve. And I would say probably my second or third trip as a captain, I saw a trip coming down the pipe in open time. And I was like, oh, that's going to be mine. And before I even flew this trip, I looked at it. I'm like, wow, this is going to be quite a trip. It was 3 days. So it was 3-leg, 4-leg, 3-leg with 11-hour, 5-minute layover on the first day, and then a sub 12-hour layover on the second night, where every night was getting in very late, 11:30, 12 o'clock, 12:30 at night. So long story is the first night was that we didn't get in until about 1 o'clock or so to the hotel. Probably got to sleep around 1:30. There wasn't much of a chance for dinner. I think we grabbed food somewhere at the terminal. Anyway, went to bed. And by 7:15, I'm hearing maids out in the hallway and slamming doors. And so I was awake, couldn't go back to sleep. It was a short layover anyway. So we proceeded to fly our day. So by the time we were on our second leg into Miami, my FO and I were both tired. We identified that as a threat. There was an incident where we started taxiing into the ramp. I had read there was a ramp frequency. My FO said, no, there's not one. And so hairs on my back were going. So I started creeping into the ramp. And all of a sudden, he's frantically going through the green pages. And he's like, oh, no. And lo and behold, of course, Miami Gates, there's a ramp freak. And it's in size 7 font buried in a paragraph. So we immediately stop the aircraft. We contact ramp. They say, hey, thanks for calling us. You're cleared on it. We immediately said, okay, we're going to file an ASAP. We got to the gate. And I realized I was really tired. I had read that there was a ramp frequency no more than probably 30, 40 minutes ago. And I had already forgotten it because I was getting tired. And we had just one or two other little things pop up, nothing that was a violation, but things where we identified, man, we are getting tired. So I made the call. It was tough because I'm a new captain. I've never done this before in my career ever. But I said, you know what? I'm getting really tired. I'm a new captain. I think I need to make the call. So I called the duty pilot. It was actually a fantastic experience. I said, I am fit to fly back to Atlanta. But after that, I don't feel I'm going to be fit to continue on. So you need to find somebody else. And that's what happened. And the call to the duty pilot was fantastic. Everything from the last podcast I listened to your guys' mock call was spot on. They said, okay, how much rest do you need? They put me into rest. I went to the Atlanta Marriott Hotel. I got 14 and a half hours of rest. I got a great night's sleep. I had breakfast in the morning. They deadheaded me to Salt Lake, and then I still finished up the rotation there. So I still did the exact same amount of legs. I just deadheaded one of those legs, but I got rest. I felt great the next day, and I completed the trip. So I guess my question for you, Lisa and Ryan, is I don't want to do this. I don't make it habitual. I'm the guy who never called in sick until I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. I catch all their germs. I love working for Delta, and I love supporting the company. But I'm worried that the current state of rotations are so fatiguing and frankly terrible that I'm going to catch another one of these trips. And I don't want to be highlighted and flagged as that guy who's continually calling in fatigued. And I know the answer is legally, I am required to do so, and I will continue to do so. But I have a fear of being highlighted and tracked by the company and all of a sudden having a file built on me saying, hey, this is a constant guy who's abusing fatigue. And so my question for you is what's the best way to proceed with that? What are our protections via PWA? I know I'm legally obligated and covered, but I think there's a lot of fear out there amongst pilots about highlighting themselves, which is why a lot of guys have not called in fatigued when I think they know they should have.
That's a great point. And it's great to hear that the mock call to duty pilot was spot on and effective. We appreciate that. Lisa, over to you.
Well, there's a few aspects to your question that I wanted to discuss. Number one, I'm very happy that the fatigue call went as planned. That's the way it's supposed to happen. You're supposed to call the duty pilot. He's going to put you immediately into rest, ask when you're going to be rested and ready for duty, and then put you back onto your rotation or deadhead you home. So it worked just as it's supposed to. You are right. You have a legal obligation. If you are fatigued or unfit for duty, you have a legal obligation under FAR 117 to call the duty pilot and get the rest you need. I just wanted to make one point. The FARs require that you have 8 hours uninterrupted sleep opportunity. So the fact that you didn't get to your room until midnight 30 and then you were woken up by maids at 7 a.m., you actually probably did not have an uninterrupted sleep opportunity. The fact that you were woken up at 7, if you felt rested, you were legal to operate that day. So that's something to think about the next time your sleep is interrupted, because you're required to have 8 hours uninterrupted sleep opportunity. So it's not 8 hours behind the door as has been printed a few times by the company, just for your information. But missed radio calls, missed RAM frequencies, all of that those are all signs of fatigue. So it's really good that you did call in fatigue. Fatigue can be very insidious. So just keep in mind those kind of things while you're flying. As far as retribution for multiple fatigue calls, twice, sometimes 3 times in 1 month, sometimes it has to do with the fact that pilots are junior and they're unable to avoid these fatiguing rotations. Sometimes it's just sheer luck that you end up being rerouted or something like that in the same month. Our fitness for duty reports are all de-identified. So when I go look up a fitness for duty report, it will have just a number. It won't have a pilot's name. It won't have their employee number. So that's a nice thing. The company switched to this software, which de-identifies all the pilots about a year ago. As we said, this is your legal obligation to call in fatigues. There's in no way, shape, or form is the company interested or allowed to build a file on a pilot. So if you need to call in fatigued, you need to call in fatigued. I would not worry about any kind of retribution. And if we can get that message out there, that would be great, because a lot of the times pilots, for whatever reason, end up flying fatigued. Either they don't want to let down 200 passengers or they want to finish the mission. Delta pilots are mission oriented. They want to finish this mission, but it is your legal obligation to call in fatigued if you need to. Does that answer your question?
It does. It was pretty much what I was expecting, but it is comforting that we are de-identified because, like I said, I think myself and most pilots, we're not looking to abuse the system, but there is absolutely a fear there. I mean, I love my job at Delta. I don't want to let down passengers and I don't want to let down Delta, frankly. But at the same time, with the current state of our rotations, I think myself and thousands of others agree that there needs to be improvement and a change that is contractual, that is something that there's metrics we can have and track. And when the company breaks it, we can hold them accountable for it. But it is good to know that we are not identified. And like you said, it's a legal thing. So that is good to know.
I think we could add, it's up to the pilot to decide whether or not you had your 8 hours uninterrupted sleep opportunities. So the fact that you were woken up at 7, if you felt rested, you were legal to operate that day.
Yeah. And at the time when I woke up, I felt rested enough when we started out. Absolutely. Otherwise, I would have made the call earlier. We were doing 4 legs that day. And those legs tend to accumulate in fatiguing nature, right? The more you're doing it, the longer the day seems, every single takeoff, landing, and checking flight plans and everything like that. So yeah, that's why I made the call. I'm not going to feel safe and rested. And it was a very hard call to make, but I did it. And like I said, I was very impressed with how the duty pilot handled it. It did go as advertised. So that was fantastic. And so if I have anything to say to other pilots, it's don't be afraid to make that call. It is your legal obligation, as we all know, but they handled it in a very professional way. These are fellow Delta pilots. And furthermore, I think the company knows how fatiguing these trips are. So I don't think it's a surprise to the duty pilot when you're calling in on some of these rotations.
I'll chime in here because this actually covers a DART that was submitted by an Atlanta ERFO, and we appreciate it. Thanks for bringing it to our attention. In episode 5, we actually brought up 8 hours behind the door, and that's not technically correct. It's 8 hours of sleep opportunity. That includes winding down, getting food, getting nutrition so that you can sleep within that opportunity. It's different for each individual. You've got to set the boundary on your own. Lisa, thanks for addressing that. Everybody needs to understand that it's a sleep opportunity.
You have to really keep watch over how you're feeling and look at the signs of fatigue and call in fatigue if you need to. A lot of pilots just do not, they want to fly the mission, they want to get it done, they don't want to inconvenience passengers, but legally they're obligated to call in fatigued. And that's actually doing the right thing. Even though it's a difficult choice and a difficult decision, it is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I feel like we've all been there, right? You're walking through the terminal, you've got 200 eyes on you, flights are delayed, you've been rerouted, there's issues with the flights, you're on a fatiguing rotation to begin with. It's tough. It's a tough call to make.
It is a tough call, but it is the right thing to do. And also, I do tell pilots, if they ended up flying a rotation and they finished it, and then they looked back and said, hey, you know what? I was really fatigued that day. What I would recommend is filing an ASAP. Even if you called in fatigued on a rotation or you finished a rotation and you realize that you were fatigued, file an ASAP. That helps. It gets it in front of the safety committee, and then they have to review that. And that it just helps add visibility to the fatigue issue.
I'll ask this question to both of you. Guys, do you feel in terms of fatigue, pilots are the circuit breakers? If the company is producing fatiguing rotations, they understand that, but it's a necessity to fly the schedule, to get the job done. Are they relying on the legality of pilots to call in fatigue when they've hit the limit? Do you feel pilots are the circuit breakers here?
Yeah, that's accurate.
Absolutely. On a side note to my story was that the following day, the last day of our rotation, my FO, we got split up. He actually ended up calling in fatigued the last day of our trip. It was just that sort of rotation where if you muscled through it, you either got some amazing sleep in those very short layovers or you were fatigued. And so he ended up calling in fatigued on the last day and was done as well. That's just what's on our plate right now for a lot of fleets, especially when you're junior, which I am. And that's what we're dealing with on the line.
All great points. Captain Ryan, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for being here, man. We really appreciate it.
Awesome, guys. Thanks. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Lisa, for the input. And Ryan, thank you so much for having me on.
You bet. We'll take a short break here, back in 30 seconds with more questions for Lisa Nydahl, the chairman of Flight Time Duty Time Committee. Stick around.
This episode of Engage is brought to you by the Delta MEC, your local representatives, and the ACE for Unions app. Send your scheduling issues and questions to the scheduling committee via the ACE for Unions app. Download today through the Apple and Android app stores.
Okay, we're back again. This is Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots. We're here with Lisa Nydahl, the chairman of the Flight Time Duty Time Committee. Lisa, give me the skinny on Flight Time Duty Time. What do you do for the pilots?
Well, like I said before, I have a great team on FRMT, and they're all very well versed on FAR 117. And each month we review all of the rotations in every bid package. In our monthly meeting, the bulk of our monthly meeting is going over bid package review and mitigating fatigue within each bid package. On the company side, they have a fatigue risk management team as well, which includes the senior planner and members of their fatigue management team. During our meeting, we go over what we consider fatiguing rotations from a science-based approach. We also have agreed on pre-month rotation construction fatigue mitigations. I know you've spoken about the list of 28 mitigations in previous podcasts. These fatigue mitigations actually precede nighttime with FRMT, And I've been on this team for a little bit over about 4.5 years. With the 28 fatigue mitigations, those are in place. The company mostly follows those fatigue mitigations, but there are many instances where they do not follow them. So we will call the company out, show them examples of where these fatigue mitigations were not followed, and ask them to follow the agreed upon mitigations.
Okay, so you know what those 28 fatigue mitigations are.
Right.
Finally, we found somebody who knows. That's reassuring. And so can you work with the company to ensure or at least sort out why they did not follow those mitigations in the circumstance?
I had a November meeting with Patrick Burns in which he pledged that the company would follow all 28 of these fatigue mitigations. And if a fatigue mitigation had to be not applied due to staffing, Patrick Burns himself personally would have to approve. He promised that he would have to physically pick up the phone or talk to the planners to approve any kind of fatigue mitigations that might be disregarded. And in our last meeting in January, we did ask the senior planner why certain fatigue mitigations were being disregarded, and had he actually picked up the phone or had a discussion with Patrick Burns regarding the disregarding of a fatigue mitigation. And the senior planner actually said, no, he doesn't call Patrick Burns and ask him for permission to disregard our pre-month rotation construction fatigue mitigations. So that is a concern.
Okay, so Patrick Burns, he's had our back on that by having to manually approve it, and the system just failed there. Is that check out?
Correct. We're hoping that in the future, Patrick Burns will actually have to approve any disregarding of fatigue mitigation, because that would make it rise to a little bit higher level.
Yeah, that would feel good. So how does it work? Take me from network saying they need to fly a particular route or schedule to a rotation that is actually on our schedules.
So the way it happens is network provides what they call a SIM to the senior planners. And that's what network wants to fly. That's their business plan. Senior planner's job is to create bid packages given the staffing levels. And now that staffing is a serious concern, and that's the biggest reason why fatigue mitigation might not be followed. The planners try to build bid packages that comply with network schedule. Sometimes that's impossible. Sometimes the planners have to go back and say, we cannot fly this plan that network has put out. That's how sometimes the fatigue mitigations are not followed, is because that's the only way that the planners can get the bid packages to work given the staffing situation at the time. We also continue to ask the company for more stringent fatigue mitigations. For example, we would like to see a decoupling of long duty days and short overnight. We'd also like to tighten down how a red eye is treated within bid packages, and also to further define a red eye. In our fatigue mitigations, as far as a red eye goes, if it's considered a red eye by the company, there's certain restrictions that are applied to that flight. For example, a minimum amount of rest prior to the red eye, minimum amount of rest after the red eye, daily over restrictions, and then max flying that night after a red eye and day layover. The problem is that the company's continuing to redefine what exactly constitutes a red eye. So we would like to further define that and come to an agreement with the company. Those are a couple of the things that we have asked our negotiators for, is to get some contractual language.
Absolutely. So we actually lead the industry in some of our fatigue mitigations. However, contractually, a hard and fast, measurable contractual provision that protect us from fatiguing rotations, that's a little lagging, right? They affect our quality of life, and we tend to lag in the industry in contractual provisions. But you're saying we actually lead the industry in behind the scenes fatigue mitigation.
Delta does have some pretty strong fatigue mitigations. With that being said, that doesn't mean that they're the greatest there ever was. We are continually striving for improvements, but we do lead certain other major airlines in regards to the fatigue mitigations that are applied to 3-month rotation construction. Now, when you're talking about made up rotations or same day rotations that are made up by crew tracking, none of the fatigue mitigations, or very few of the fatigue mitigations, are required to be applied to those rotations.
And that's a key distinction. That's a key point. So when you look at the bid package, those have been applied or those that have been filtered through the fatigue mitigation process. But if you're rerouted or fly a created rotation, then those fatigue measures probably haven't been applied.
They're not always applied. I do have to say that they try to apply most of our fatigue mitigations, but they also have to man the operation. And they have to get flights covered, especially day of. So sometimes they will disregard some or all of our fatigue mitigations to get that flight covered.
Yeah, Delta is trying to run an airline. Management is trying to run a business, especially as we come back from COVID, as we come back for Omicron, still facing the staffing issues. I feel like the Delta pilots get it, right? We understand it. We want the company to succeed. We want to be a part of that. We're invested in the company. We're just asking for the company to invest in us, invest back, right? Isn't that what our lanyards say?
Yeah, I think the company actually wants to create less fatiguing rotations, but they're restricted by what network wants and by our staffing levels. And the staffing levels is the key to this. I've been told that it's going to be up to 2 years from now to get the staffing where we need to be to man the operation on a pre-COVID level as far as fatigue goes. So it's going to be quite a while before rotations significantly improve. So it's not actually getting better. It's getting a little bit worse. And there's not a lot we can do about it right now. That's the frustrating part.
Yeah, that is frustrating. And that's the sentiment we're getting from feedback from the pilot group, not just through polling. We have literally hundreds of DART submissions that talk about horrid rotations. They talk about fatiguing rotations and the quality of life that is happening because of such staffing and scheduling. And even just a normal rotation, the extensions, the delays, it's getting old fast. So it's going to take 2+ years to recoup to the staffing level that we need. We really need to work with the company, but we also need to work within the contract to make sure that we protect ourselves for times like these or when something else happens, right?
That's correct. We would definitely like to see more definitions in the contract. For example, a red eye. I'll give you just an example. Right now, if a pilot flies from the West Coast to the East Coast and lands at 4:55 a.m. based on East Coast time, and he's actually a West Coast-based pilot, they don't consider that a red eye. I don't know about you, but if I land at 4:55 a.m. after leaving at night from the West Coast, I would think that I just flew a red eye. Well, the company doesn't consider that a red eye because they're landing 5 minutes prior to their window of circadian low. So they're landing at 1:55 a.m. pilot base time. All of our red eye treatments are not applied to that flight. So for example, they can fly a leg prior to the red eye, have a short layover, and then fly that red eye. And that would be something that would be included in a bid package at this time. So if we could get more contractual teeth on exactly what a red eye is and a better definition of a red eye, that situation wouldn't happen.
Yeah, that seems to make sense. You would have a contractual definition of a red eye and apply it to all, maybe I say all fleets, but maybe apply it across the board.
Correct.
So let's turn to another DART. This one comes from an LA-based A320 Captain. And this pilot writes in, doesn't the Rotation Construction Committee or FRMT review the rotations before they are published in the bid package? Can't we get out ahead of these fatiguing rotations before they're ever published? Can't we push back with the company?
Rotations are more fatiguing than we've seen in history. It has to do with COVID and network and when they provide the schedule to the planners. Before COVID, network would provide the sims really early in the month, and then the senior planner would provide the bid package to our team by the 25th of the month. And we would review all the bid packages. We would have enough time in which we could provide feedback to the company and actually create change within the bid packages. So they would listen to us and say, oh yeah, you're right. This looks very fatiguing. Let's change that rotation. And that would happen on a regular basis, on a monthly basis. Ever since COVID started, Network has been providing the sims to the planners very late, as late as the 1st of the month. So the planners are scrambling at the last moment to create these bid packages. And sometimes our team doesn't get the bid packages until the 4th, when they're actually published to DeltaNet. So we don't have as much possibility to change bid packages. At that point, the bid packages have been published. So to create change, we'd actually have to get the rotations assigned to a pilot and then change that rotation after the fact, which causes a lot more money than just changing them before they're assigned at all. So that is a byproduct of the changing issues with COVID and what's going on with our network. And that's part of why there are very fatiguing rotations.
That's good insight that we don't have as well. So yeah, thanks for that. What I'm getting is that behind the scenes, in between network and the senior planners who create the rotations, things are circumstantially just a little bit behind, right? So by the time the bid packages come to the MEC for review, it's the day of or the day before they publish the bid packages. So things feel a little rushed. And so the advocation for, or the review process that FRMT and rotation construction has once done, it's not as thorough as it was. And I don't want to say that it's not as thorough, but the whole process is a little rushed circumstantially, right?
That's correct. We just don't get the rotations changed like we used to. After publication, the company is unwilling to change rotations that would have been changed previously.
Lisa, if the company came to you tomorrow and said, we're done, we want to fix fatiguing rotations, we want to take care of this, we don't know how, tell us how to do it. What would you tell the company? How do you fix it?
Well, we've already told them. We've given them a list of science-based lists of certain mitigations that would significantly improve rotations and make them less fatiguing. And the company has not done any of them. They have not implemented any of them. And these are fatigue mitigations that we have suggested over time and time again, on a monthly basis to the company, telling them what we consider would make the operation more reliable and less fatigued.
But there's got to be relief in sight, right? We can push through a holiday period. We can push through summer months where staffing is short, but there's got to be relief. And we understand that hiring is increased. They're cranking out tons of new hires. 250 a month is the last number I've got from membership. So they're working on it, but it's a time-sensitive problem. And I think we understand that. Let's do our last DART submission here. This is from a New York ERFO. We appreciate your feedback here. We don't mention your name unless you put in there that you want us to mention your name. But this pilot is talking about green slips and fatigue. You're saying all these rotations are fatiguing in the bid packages. You're going to fly your normal schedule. And he asked us to bring up a point, and I think this is a great point with you on the show. This pilot wants us to bring up the point that when you fly a green slip or you put in for a green slip, it's incumbent upon the pilot to determine whether they've gotten the appropriate amount of rest. So when you accept a green slip, as far as FAR 117, that responsibility falls on you. What do you have to say about that?
Well, we're all professionals. We all know that we need to comply with all the FARs. So part of the FARs require that you be rested to complete your duties. And so as a professional, you need to evaluate when you're getting that ARCOS call, whether or not you'll be rested and able to complete your duties on that rotation. That's an individual responsibility.
And so what if you call in fatigue on a green slip?
Green slip, white slip, it doesn't matter what it is. The process is the same. It's looked at the same, and you'll be protected. If it's a regular trip or a green slip, it really doesn't matter. You should be going through the same process, have it be seamless and not have any retribution for that. We've even had pilots who get green slips and then turn around and say, wait, hang on, I'm not rested. And we used to call that a regret slip, but it happens.
Lisa, thanks so much. Everyone, Lisa Nydahl, the chairman of Flight Time Duty Time Committee, thanks for being here. We really appreciate your time. We appreciate what you do for us, for the pilots. We really can't thank you enough. Thanks for having our back.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
This has been Engaged, the podcast for Delta pilots. Thanks for listening. My name is Ryan Argenta. Stay safe and keep the rubber on the road.
You're listening to Engage, the podcast for Delta pilots. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or your favorite podcast platform, and receive notifications when a new episode is available.